Data market, data economy, and data companies in the EU. In this module, we will explore the concrete indicators of the European data market, the data economy, the data companies in Europe. This discussion is part of our broader exploration of whether a market for data sharing exists and how Europe positions itself in the global landscape. First of all, let me guide you through the distinction between two concepts so that you get a complete understanding. The two concepts are specifically the data market and the data economy. It is important to distinguish between them. While the data market refers to the marketplace where transactions, including the buying and selling of data sets and services, happen, the data economy, on the other hand, encompasses the broader economic impact of data-driven innovation, including value-added services, employment, and sectoral transformations. As such, the data economy is a wider concept than the data market. Both are important to decide on investments in data-related technologies, though. Let's have a look at the European data market for the EU27. Over the years, the European data market has shown significant growth. By 2023, the size of the data economy had expanded significantly, reflecting the increasing importance of data as a strategic asset for businesses and governments. This has been kept since then. In the picture, you can see actual measurements for 2022 and 2023 and projections for 2030, based on the scenarios that I explained before, the baseline, the high growth, and the challenges scenarios. In all cases, we see a positive compound annual growth rate. The best figure obviously relates to the high growth scenario, where we could expect a percentage of 7.1 growth in 2030 with respect to the situation in 2025. In this scenario, the value of the European data market in 2030 would be of 141 billion euro. The baseline scenario shows a growth between those years in about 3.3%, with a value of 180 billion euro in 2030. The European data economy in the EU27 reached a value of 229 billion euro in 2015, and it has suffered an expansion since then, driven by multiple factors, including the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning, the proliferation of IoT and connected devices, enhanced regulatory frameworks that aim to foster data sharing while ensuring privacy and security, or, for example, the role of SMEs and large enterprises in leveraging data for competitive advantage. We can see that the growth of the data economy in 2023 with respect to 2022 was already of 9.3%, with a share of the EU GDP of 4.2%. If we look at the predictions in 2030 for the different scenarios, following the methodology that I explained before, we see a relevant increase of value, reaching a peak in the high growth scenario of almost 9%, with a total value of 6.5% of the EU GDP. In all scenarios, and looking at both the European data market and the European data economy, we see a steady growth. There you have the actual measurements and some predictions that consider multiple factors so that you can play a bit with them and understand the way forward and how to prepare for it. This nice picture presents the size of the European data economy per country based on actual data of 2023. The visual representation is quite useful to perceive differences among member states. For example, Germany and France are very prominent in the data economy, with countries like Spain, Italy, and the Netherlands following. We also see many laggards that will have to react if they don't want to be out of this data wave, with the related implications. Without entering in much detail, let's have a look at the number of data companies in the EU. These companies operate across sectors such as finance, healthcare, retail, and manufacturing, driving innovation through advanced analytics and data-centric business models. Figures show both data suppliers and data users. The analysis of available data from 2023 shows a growth in both of them, reaching around a 2% share of the total number of companies in Europe. More interesting is to check the projections for 2030 and the number of data suppliers and data users, since this will give a good idea of the relevance of having mechanisms to share and consume data in the future. Let's dive into the baseline and high growth scenarios. Both of them showcase very significant growth of data companies in 2030, including data suppliers and users. Particularly interesting is the fact that data users will grow much more than data suppliers, illustrating that companies see data as an asset for competitiveness in the market. However, despite growth, challenges such as fragmented regulations and interoperability concerns may persist if they are not properly addressed. Some insights on this will come later as part of this training. Let's have a look at the international dimension of the data economy. On the global stage, the EU is the second largest data economy behind the United States. However, China is growing at a much faster pace and is already surpassing the EU in some aspects of data-driven GDP contributions. The EU has been actively working towards digital sovereignty and strategic autonomy through initiatives like the Trade and Technology Councils gathering in 2023 and collaborations with the US through the CHIPS Act and international cooperation. In terms of measured growth, US, China, and Japan show better performance than the EU, with other economies like Brazil lagging behind. Remember what I introduced at the beginning of this training about the new developments and investments in AI and get your own conclusions. So how does the EU compare to global competitors in terms of approach? For example, EU-US relations, the US and EU continue to cooperate through initiatives like the Trade Technology Council and the revamped Transatlantic Data Privacy Network. However, challenges remain in areas such as the Digital Markets Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. EU-China relationships. The EU has taken a more interventionist stance with its de-risking strategy, highlighted in the first EU Economic Security Package. However, in 2023, there was a shift towards deeper cooperation in certain areas. In conclusion, the European data market and economy are evolving rapidly with significant growth potential. While the EU is making strides in digital sovereignty and competitiveness, it faces challenges from both the US and China. Continued regulatory adjustments, innovation-driven policies, and international collaboration will need to be considered.